Welcome, everybody. Seeing the numbers start to jump up. Lovely. Just like splash the water in front of myself as everybody's joining us. All right, so we'll give it a little bit longer, give some time for everybody to get settled and enjoy a little bit of kitten time. So yes, this is Midge. Midge is my foster kitten, and she is about 6 weeks old. So figured it's a good time to to bring her on as we're kind of getting through the mid-conference slump. And so I feel like we're almost there. Attendees are still sort of trickling in, slowing down just a little bit more. And so, all right, Midge, what do you need? All right, so I think we will go ahead and get us started. Let me move things out of my way. All right. Well, welcome to our Wednesday afternoon for Calm 2023. This is the Lightning Talks DEI theme. My name is Kat Bell. This is my foster kitten, Midge, and we're here to just provide a little bit of housekeeping before we get our session started today. So as a reminder, this session is being recorded. Captions are available during the session by clicking on the Live CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Thank you so much to our captioner for providing those. Let's see, please use the Q&A feature for any presentation questions. You can choose to do this anonymously since this is a lightning talk. If you could please tag the presenter or the presentation that your question is for, that would be very helpful. And we will wait until the end to take live Q&A for all presenters, but they may answer your questions in the Q&A chat if they feel like they can do that. Please use the chat for general comments or technical questions. I believe Shanti is here with me again today to help monitor the chat for any questions and comments, and she will also be adding some links into the chat related to collaborative resource sharing, code of conduct, and stream text live transcript. So we are scheduled to have 4 lightning talks today. We are still waiting on one presenter. So we'll go ahead and get started with our first one. And I will just wait and introduce each lightning talk beforehand. So Emily, if you want to go ahead and start getting your slides up, that would be great. So our first lightning talk for today is all gender restrooms, necessary and possible. And this is brought to you by Emily Peebles, Lora Ericson, and Alyssa Ross. So feel free to take it on.
Welcome, everyone. We are presenting from the University of North Texas. We are a Tier 1 research university in Denton, Texas. I am Lora. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll be presenting with Emily. Her pronouns are she, they, and Alyssa, pronouns she, her. We are excited to talk to you about our all-gender restroom project. We'll start off with a little bit about the need. The need for inclusion. The 2015 U.S. Trans Survey, the largest survey that is dedicated to transgender lives and more broadly represents transgender, trans, genderqueer, and non-binary people, found that 59% of transgender respondents avoided using a restroom, 8% had developed kidney problems or UTIs from avoiding bathroom usage, 23% of transgender workers within that year faced mistreatment, and unemployment rates were 3 times higher for transgender people than cisgender. Additionally, the 2015 OSHA Guide to Restroom Access recommends providing all gender restrooms with lockable single stalls or single occupancy. Rester and Reisner's 2017 publication states recommendations that the use of all gender restrooms should be addressed with a, quote, direct institutional statement on gender inclusivity, end quote, for the sake of public health in order to provide anti-discriminatory policies and affirm individuals' identities. Further, in a Society for Human Resource Management article from 2019, LaBelle writes that benefits include attracting prospective employees and retaining current valuable employees by promoting diversity and inclusion, aligning with DEIA values. This picture from Out and Equal Workplace Advocates shows examples of potential signage. Displaying signage on your all-gender restroom that promotes binary genders or, at best, implies a third gender can be harmful and confusing. The first two images are examples of what not to use. The third image is inclusive and clearly welcomes all gender identities by showing that there is a handicap-accessible toilet, while the two on the left are offensive.
UNT began an initiative to offer all-gender restrooms across its Denton campus in 2014. To date, there are 125 existing all-gender restrooms. 3 of them are multi-stall restrooms. Here you can see the signage created by the Division of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, or IDEA, which explains that anyone can use the restroom, regardless of gender identity. There are also 122 single-stall restrooms, which are available to people of all genders. The main library on campus, Willis Library, has 1 all-gender restroom on the 4th floor. Over the course of this project, we have been in communication with the UNT Pride Alliance, who are developing a complete list and map of the all-gender restrooms available at UNT. So as far as identifying our need, the library annex where we work is a remote storage facility 1 mile from campus. Collection management is housed here, along with parts of preservation, facility staff, some digital libraries employees, and special collections processing. This building is access controlled and is for regular and student employees only. The building was built with 2 female-oriented restrooms, each with 2 stalls, and 2 male restrooms. One has 2 stalls and a urinal, and one has 1 stall and a urinal. As the number of employees have grown here, so has the diversity. We noticed the need for more inclusive restroom options and formed an interest group to get to work.
Once the interest group was formed, we sought approval from the dean. She immediately agreed, so our small task force went on a toilet tour to determine what location and arrangement of stalls and/or urinals would work best. The next major step was to survey annex staff about their thoughts. The associate dean notified annex staff that we were considering changing one of our restrooms and asked for feedback. If people preferred to provide feedback anonymously, they were welcome to put a typed note in the interoffice mail. And we received very little input. One employee did bring up accessibility concerns. And after gathering information, we chose the men's restroom, which had only 1 stall and 1 urinal. This choice was made because it maximizes the number of available stalls in the building overall, and because the restroom is accessible. At this point, we needed to obtain approval from campus facilities to ensure that we were not going to affect any legal, safety, or occupancy rules regarding the number of required restrooms per staff. They were on board, so we ordered a lock and requested a sign. We wanted to make sure that the lock was very clear about occupancy status to avoid any awkward interruptions. And while we did not go into the process with an established budget, our related costs consisted of the task force's time and labor, the lock and sign, as well as facility staff time for installing the lock and sign. Naming the restroom is where we had some extensive discussion. We checked with the Campus Pride Alliance to see what they suggested, which was to use the term all gender. However, we ended up having to use the standard sign that campus facilities was willing to provide. Lora mentioned earlier that the imagery on the sign can be welcoming or not. And although we weren't happy with the binary representation on our sign and do not recommend using signage with these symbols, we do like the wording of individual restroom. And we still colloquially refer to it as the all-gender restroom. One of the steps we prioritized throughout this process was establishing guidelines for restroom use. The goal of the guidelines was to outline the need for change, create clear expectations, and prevent misunderstandings. An employee had provided feedback that indicated they were uncertain who could use the all-gender restroom, so clarifying that the all-gender restroom is for people of all genders to use was a priority for us. In the guidelines themselves, we provided a background section that outlines the former status of the restroom, as well as the reasons for our decision to convert the restroom. We cite the alarming statistics from the 2015 US Trans Survey that Lora shared and include that our intention to convert the restroom is in line with the university's mission of fostering a caring and inclusive community. We also outlined the location of the all-gender restroom in wording and through our annex building map, and explained that people of any gender identity or ability can use the all-gender restroom. We also took the opportunity at that time to explain that anyone can use any restroom at the annex, as no one is permitted to query or verify an individual's gender identity or accessibility needs. There were a couple considerations that we chose to address preemptively based on the feedback we initially received. One of those was why we chose the rear men's restroom to convert, and the other was what to do if the all-gender restroom is occupied and it is needed for accessibility reasons. Once the restroom was switched over, we emailed the guidelines to all Annex employees. We also saved the guidelines in the drive that all Annex employees have access to and referenced them in our Welcome to the Annex document so that new and existing employees can reference them at any time.
As far as next steps, we did a little bit of advertising. We submitted a story to the library's weekly newsletter called Friday Frags so that library employees across campus would know about this change. As far as the status, the restroom is being used regularly. We obviously don't have statistics on that because we're not tracking people's bathroom usage, but kind of anecdotally, as people working in the building, we do know that it is being used. As far as issues, the only issues that have arisen have involved a few people forgetting to secure the new door lock. We believe this is likely because of facilities and maintenance workers who do not regularly work in the annex and were unaware of the change. So we are putting up a sign to remind people there's a lock now. People are expecting this room to be empty if you don't lock it. And then as far as assessment, we sent a survey to all Annex employees to get their opinions on the all-gender restroom, and the results were overwhelmingly positive. 91.3% believe it is important for libraries to have all-inclusive restrooms, and 95.65% are glad that we now have an all-gender restroom in the Annex.
Thank you so much for attending our lightning talk today. We hope that you feel encouraged to initiate an all-gender restroom in your own library workspaces. Please email us if you have questions or feedback. And we've also got a references slide for you as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Just a reminder to please add in any questions that you have for this group in the Q&A. Paul, you are welcome to go ahead and get your slide share up and running. We'll make sure that is all good to go. Just let me know when you are good.
I think we're all set.
Yep, that looks perfect. Great. All right, I'd like to welcome our next presenter. This is DBias, Your Hiring Practices, Supporting Equity for Neurodiverse Candidates in Job Interviews with Paul Glassman. Take it away, Paul.
Thank you, Kat. The social demands of most job interviews may disadvantage those candidates who are less adept in social settings, especially neurodiverse individuals with autism spectrum disorder. While interviewing and hiring for emotional intelligence, known as EI, can have a positive impact on organizational operations and achievements. At the same time, equitable hiring practices may require adaptations to interview procedures that assess emotional intelligence if they are to support neurodiverse candidates' job interview success. In 1988, Rutgers University psychologist Daniel Goleman published his influential What Makes a Leader in Harvard Business Review.
Paul, can I interrupt you for just 1 second? I think
Yes.
there are maybe some Zoom screens at the top that are covering some of your slides. We're seeing some gray boxes, so if there's a way that you could slide them over.
Oh,
Are you seeing that on your end at all?
I see a gray box, but it's part of the.
Okay, so I guess you're not seeing what we're seeing. Not
Yeah.
a problem. I think we can mostly see what your slides say.
Oh dear, huh? Okay. Um, um, so in an effort to cultivate empathy in the workplace, many search committees have incorporated EI questions and assessments into their processes. But since a key aspect of emotional intelligence requires the capacity to recognize agreed upon emotional qualities in nonverbal cues, such as facial expression and visual stimuli, the neurodiverse candidate is unlikely to succeed if emotional intelligence criteria overshadow all others. For all but the most socially adept, the employment interview is challenging and produces social anxiety. With its imbalance of power, the applicant moves into a highly judgmental space, often populated by several members of a search committee who may be untutored in the components of a fair process driven by empathy. For neurodiverse candidates who might otherwise thrive in library sectors that rely on, for example, attention to detail, thorough execution of protocols, and systematic activity, the interview may well become a barrier to securing employment. Even in the mass media, awareness of biases toward neurodiverse applicants is growing. In the television program As We See It, distributed by Amazon Prime in 2022, Jack Hoffman, a gifted computer programmer on the autism spectrum, cannot regulate how he expresses his assessments of others. The viewer senses that if Jack loses his job, the odds of success in an interview for a new job are low. Jack reflects the despair of many applicants with disabilities who, despite the Americans with Disabilities Act, are likely to find prospective employers and their recruitment processes singularly inimical. Can people see the other slide now?
Not yet, Paul.
Oh, all right. Now I think it's visible, right?
Yes.
Let's check in on how our weekly goals are going. As a part of moving into this apartment, we all agreed on a certain set of goals.
Yes, I need to get and maintain a job. Check. And I need to make friends.
To de-bias hiring practices for neurodiverse applicants, search committees and hiring authorities will need to balance carefully the benefits of their assessments of emotional intelligence or soft skills with more measurable competencies, such as knowledge of information technology, subject expertise, manual skill, or documented accomplishments. For many neurodiverse applicants, the interview is a proverbial minefield. In the United Kingdom, the unemployment rate for people on the autism spectrum is estimated at 78%, and in the United States, the number increases to 85%. Here are some strategies to ensure greater equity. Advice to job seekers on the autism spectrum about disclosure of their disability during the course of the job search varies, from sharing early in the process to postponement until after the job begins. Attentiveness to the overarching structure of the appointment with the candidate, as well as the setting, will help ease the sensory integration issues many people with autism have. Some strategies: replacing committee or panel interviews with sequential interviews with individuals, locating the interview in a quiet, gently lit, fragrance-free space, and avoiding conversations over food and meals, which can elicit unnecessary anxiety. General guidelines for interview questions include asking closed questions rather than open questions, asking questions grounded in specific past experience and avoiding hypothetical questions, gently stopping candidates who over-answer and letting them know that they have answered the question, and being prepared for overly literal misinterpretations of ambiguous language. Adaptations may include supplying the questions in writing for reference during the meeting, stating the number of questions that will be asked, and dividing complex questions into multiple one-topic questions. Although not all work settings can adopt comprehensive programs to recruit and hire applicants on the autism spectrum, they can be prepared at minimum to design and plan interviews that support neurodiverse job applicants' success. Reforming interview practices for neurodiverse applicants may even help the organization counter bias in interviews more generally. Emotionally intelligent interviewers will demonstrate their own EI skill in treating others according to their emotional responses when they empathize with neurodiverse applicants by calibrating their questions and modulating the atmosphere they create. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciated your presentation. Please go ahead and put any questions that you have in the Q&A for Paul as we switch to our final presenter today. All right, Paul, feel free to go ahead and mute yourself and stop your video for right now, and we'll bring you all back for the Q&A at the end. And Ying, are you good to go?
Yes, I am.
Great. Yes,
can
I can
everyone
hear you.
see?
All
Okay.
right. So our third presenter, and possibly our last one for today, is Ying Zhang, who will be presenting Develop and Nurture Library Managers.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, my first conference, and thanks, Kat, for the introduction. My name is Ying Zhang. I'm the Associate Dean at the University of Central Florida in Orlando, Florida. We're probably the largest university you have never heard of. But today, my presentation here is to talk about develop and nurture library managers from a DEI perspective. And to kind of go into the topic, I'm going to provide a very brief background of myself, and then go through a few skills that to develop to become a library manager. And then once you become a library manager, the next topic I talk about is actually nurture others to be the future library managers. And lastly, I'll share some takeaways. So a little bit about myself, and like most of the librarians in the profession, or maybe all of us, we're highly educated. I've got multiple masters, including MBA, and I entered the profession with a high service mind. I wanted to serve people, and being able to help users was really satisfying. And I'm very curious, eager to learn things, and always trying to stay on top of the technology and new topics. And then, especially in my early career, I was viewed very quiet, but it didn't really mean that I didn't have opinion. As a matter of fact, I'm quite opinionated. So sounds familiar. On the other side, I also am minoritized. As you can see, that I'm a BIPOC member by ethnicity. I'm Asian. I'm also an immigrant. So I was raised in a culture that really taught me that modesty is a virtue. You shall never brag about your accomplishment. Just work hard and do it quietly, and then your accomplishment will be acknowledged and rewarded accordingly. And with that, actually, my language, I'm bilingual. English is not my first language. So this is the background that goes into my pursuit of becoming a library manager. So the journey to become a library manager was a long one for me. And along the way, I actually have summarized some skills and say talking points to share. Number one is communication. You know that we all always talk about communication, and it is true that to actually continuously improve and cultivate effective communication is the key to be an effective employee, but especially for library manager, you do need to be able to convey the messages to your direct reports and to your supervisors very clearly. And by the way, I also learned that communication and language are not the same thing. You can overcome the language barrier and to reach clear communication. And also, I have learned that you have to create visible engagement. You have to increase visibility. Remember, I talked about I'm the quiet but opinionated one, and wanted to practice modesty. That did not really work very well. So I learned to kind of increase my visibility, speak up, and just toot my own horns. And find a professional network was something that huge for me, and I thought it was really the best thing to me for becoming a library manager. As the minoritized member of my library, I wasn't able to find a very good support network. So I turned to a professional organization. In my case was the Chinese American Librarians Association, one of the 5 ethnic caucuses affiliated with ALA. And I'm telling you that these are all of them are terrific. I served as a president and got to know all 5 in some sense. And not only I found a lot of people with my similar profile and background that we could support each other, but also it provided the platform for me to learn and practice leadership and management skills. And along the way, this is a constant thing, have to overcome self-doubts. And I think that there are a lot of us with self-doubts. You just have to work hard on overcome and then be resilient, because success is not a constant. Actually, failure comes along constantly. You just have to learn to kind of get over it and move on. And that was actually the key for me. And then for my own management style, as I said earlier, I had an MBA, learned all these theories, did not really understand them at the time, but over the time when I was pursuing to become a library manager, I've cultivated my own style, learned from others, and steer away from some of the stereotypical advice. So ultimately for my own. But most importantly, for someone in my profile, I think celebrate my own diversity is a key. Don't let be a hindrance. Don't dissuade yourself saying, oh, because you're the minority or then you cannot do it. That's not true. So now that I am a manager, I'm making a very conscious decision to nurture people both in my library as well as in the profession to become future library managers. In First of all, you have to care, you have to know your people. Everyone is saying that, every manager virtually saying, I have an open door policy, come to me, but you really have to mean it. And you have to listen to people, let them know that you care, and exercise empathy. Empathy goes a long way in management and also in nurturing. And once you know of someone who's interested in become a manager or who's considering, or if you spot a talent, offer yourself to be a mentor. In my early career, I knew how important mentor was, but I was too timid to really seek out, and I did not know how to actually, or who to turn to be a mentor. So now that I'm reaching the point at my career, I'm offering myself to be a mentor. Many cases just to come to talk to me. We can do it officially or unofficially. And I find it's a best way to nurture others. And of course, as a manager, you always have to advocate for your people and for the people you mentor, and even for people who actually come to you for advice. I firmly believe lead by example, because you have always heard that, oh, I had a bad manager, or people are saying, why you manage this way? Well, because I learned from my manager. So as a result, I think, why don't I just be a good manager in my book and try to set the example and foster a really positive environment. Now, the last bullet, I think, is really the most challenging one. Understand the difference between equity and equality and practice both. Because really, as a manager, and also to nurture other people, you need to be fair. You have to treat people fairly, but you also have to understand people with diversity or with some extra challenge. They may need a little bit more help, and you have to find a way to give them extra advice or a nudge or assistance. So it doesn't mean that you're not treating everyone fairly, but you have to build in that equity and equality mindset. So with all that, the takeaway for my presentation is really library managers come from very different backgrounds and can be all personalities. I used to believe that managers have to share certain kind of personality, have to be charismatic, have to be very eloquent. And all these things are true, but not so true. if you want to be a manager, you can be despite not having these qualities, or despite the fact that you may not think you have these qualities. There's no such thing as one size fits for all good managers. So you just have to kind of believe in yourself, practice it, and reflect on yourself. And really, it takes good managers to develop those skills and to nurture a positive ecosystem so that we can have more good managers in librarianship. Because I know that all of us would have to deal with our managers or have to manage others, so we can actually together create such what I call a positive ecosystem. And lastly, I want to follow the theme that I heard over and over at this conference is to be human, to manage how you want to be managed. I think that's actually something that all of us could find some common things. With that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ying. If you want to go ahead and stop your share, I'll ask all of our presenters to come back and turn on your videos so that we can see you. We do have several questions coming into our Q&A, so feel free to keep adding in any questions that you have. And looks like we've got a good 20 minutes or so for questions. So the first one that I'm seeing in the Q&A is for Emily, Alyssa, and Lora. I'm curious if you have experienced any pushback or heard about any pushback to all gender restrooms given the current political climate, and if so, how you've dealt with it.
Yeah, so we've been really lucky to not experience a ton of pushback. The only thing I can really think of is when we first asked employees for their thoughts, there was some concern about quote unquote losing a men's restroom and men not having that space. And so we tried to really communicate that you're not losing this space. Anyone can use it. You can still use this restroom regardless of your gender identity. But I think we've been really lucky with the kind of existing climate at UNT that we do already have that initiative for gender neutral restrooms. It's been around for almost a decade. And the sort of community at UNT and the city of Denton more generally is pretty open and accepting, especially in contrast to a lot of other places in Texas. So I do know that that is an issue that a lot of people are going to face if they try to implement a similar project. But I think focusing on that idea of no one's losing a bathroom, it's just a single stall restroom that anyone can use. And I think that helps make it feel a little less scary to people who have that fear of like, oh, there's a man in my restroom. And just trying to make sure people understand that you hear where they're coming from, but also this is a net good for everybody and anyone can use this.
Emily, Lora, anything you want to add?
I think she answered it pretty well.
Okay, great. So like I mentioned before, feel free to put any questions that you have in the Q&A. Paul, you have two questions that are very similar, but I will go ahead and start that one and then see if we can transition into the second one. So somebody says past success does not equate to future success. Can you talk more about not asking hypothetical questions? That seems to disadvantage stretch applicants, those who want to grow into a position and may need to talk broadly, not specifically.
If I'm understanding correctly, so it's about, the question has to do with hypothetical questions. Actually, from personal experience, this recommendation actually resonated with me. Based on actually an MBA program and a human resources course in an MBA program in which I focused on emotional intelligence in interviews, we started introducing some questions based on those guidelines, those objectives in interviews here at Yeshiva University. some broader, slightly more abstract questions, such as, can you think of a time that you had to cultivate buy-in for a difficult initiative, or an initiative that was not universally accepted, something to that nature. And I did find that most of the applicants had difficulty with questions like that. So I'm not sure that concretizing a question prevents the particularly comfortable, adept interviewer from answering more generally and more hypothetically, and then narrowing the answer down. But I guess I feel this is an example of an adaptation that might have a broader benefit beyond specifically neurodiverse applicants. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you. And kind of on the other end of this, it feels like closed questions might not give applicants to explain their experience, might not give applicants the opportunity to explain their experience and what they bring to a role. Can you speak more about asking closed questions instead of open questions?
Well, as I understand it, if you're specific about asking, well, for example, the question might be, could you share with us how your experience has prepared you for this position? It might be adapted to in a way that's a bit more specific. Can you breaking it down, can you list for us your most important work experiences? And then segue into, does one of those experiences stand out as being related to how you understand this position? So it's one of the last things, one of the last slides, I think. It's breaking the more complex question into two more discrete questions. And I'm not sure that that necessarily compromises the objective of the question. I think it just makes it a bit friendlier for people who might need that extra clarity.
Great, thank you. Paul, before we go to that other question, I believe you actually had a question for Ying. Would you like to ask that?
Oh, sure. I guess, did I put it in the wrong place? Sorry. You mentioned, you had a slide that had the terms equity and equality. And I wondered if you could say a bit more about the difference between those two concepts.
Absolutely. I think equality is just treating everyone exactly the same way, but equity is to understand everyone has a unique circumstances and provide a little bit more resources, so to make them more equally. I'm going to go back and using your example. It's just like when you interview a group of people, and if you have someone who's diverse candidate, you're going to probably break down a question a little bit further. You're not really treating anyone. I mean, just you're providing equity, so you're providing equally and equitably. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the question.
All right. Ying, I'm going to go ahead and go to this next question, and then Paul will come back to that other one for you. For Ying, can you say a bit more about how you imagine your communication style may be unique to your identity, and how you share that distinctiveness with your staff of differing backgrounds? Do you find that you are bending to communicate with your staff, or are you expecting them to meet you halfway?
Wow, that's a great question. It's really a work in progress, and I still have to say that till this day, I'm still, like I said, in continuously trying to improve and find and to enhance the style. My communication style, as I said, that comes a long way, that I'm trying to find the first and foremost, get it out clearly, and make sure that understand each other very well. And you'll find me that in many cases, I'm asking a lot of follow-up questions. Did that make sense? Or that's just one of actually a byproduct of my communication, just to kind of overcome some of the things in my background. And then I don't think it's really unique, but I think it is something that I consciously developed into my communication to make sure that I convey the messages clearly, or I interpret it the other side clearly and accurately. And I do not think that I'm bending the communication with my staff. I think a lot of times it's just I find the communication is just the same way. You just repeat the same messages. And if there are things that you find that it's a little vague, either from me or from them, just ask follow-up questions and then follow up with examples. I think storytelling and examples really goes a long way with the communication. Does that does that kind of answer your question?
I'll have to wait and hear from whoever asked that question if that did it. But I think that's a great answer. So thank you so much. Paul, the sixth question is for you. It's a biggie, I think, and feel free if anybody else has any questions. We have plenty of time. So the attendee writes, I've been a huge proponent of prioritizing emotional intelligence, but now I understand that there is a bias in that concept. Is there a better way to conceptualize and frame the skills that EI attempts to prioritize?
Thank you. I was trying to see the question to read it, but I don't see it.
Do you see it in your Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen?
Oh.
Yeah.
Now I see it.
Yep, it'll be in the open tab there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that really is the $64,000 question. How do we remove the bias toward neurodiverse candidates and at the same time include an EI component for positions where that is in which we consider that to be an essential quality. I guess I would say just following the same guidelines and breaking any complex question down into its more into its constituent parts. So, such as the question that I mentioned before, which was fairly complex. I think another example is, can you give us an example of a time that something didn't go well, and explain what happened and explain what your response was? So maybe just just first saying, can you think of a time that an exchange that was difficult, or you had to ask somebody for something that was difficult for you to ask? And I think helping the candidate frame the question by adding a few components that provides more parameters. And then once you have that answer, you can say, and then how did you respond? And I think, and this is an example of another question that I found that candidates presumably, I can't be sure, not on the autism spectrum had difficulty answering. And I think in retrospect, had we broken that very question down into its constituent parts, everybody, including people, neurodiverse candidates, may have been more comfortable answering that question and may have provided better answers.
Great. Thank you, Paul. So as we wait to see if any other questions come in, I do have another question for our UNT group. So you all mentioned that the university is doing a map for all gender restrooms across campus. And that piqued my interest because my university is going to do a map with all lactation spaces on campus. So can you talk a little bit more about how that map, who kind of led the charge to get that started, and what is it going to look like?
I can answer this one as well, if y'all two are okay with that. So the MAP project is being done by the UNT Pride Alliance, which is actually part of IDEA, the Office of, oh, what did it stand for? I said it. identity, diversity, equity, and accessibility. I just call it IDEA. But so we actually have that department on campus, and the Pride Alliance is part of that. And so they have been leading the charge. And that's where I got my numbers from when I asked, hey, do you guys have a complete list? And that's how we found out about the project to create a map. I can find a link to the Pride Alliance website and post that in the chat if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great, Alyssa. And I see Janelle just shared their map for University of Louisiana Lafayette. Sorry if I probably mispronounced that. And so that's great to see. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. Do any of the presenters have any questions for each other before we close out? Ying, go ahead.
I have a question for the group from UNT also on that map. So I remember you were showing some not so good signage versus the good one. So is the one that you gave a check mark going to go on the map, or how are you going to actually, what kind of visual signs you're going to create on the maps? I understand the signage for your annex was not exactly that way, but how about the map?
So the map itself is being developed by the Pride Alliance, so we actually don't really have control over what the symbolism will look like on the map. But the sign we did receive was from our campus facilities, and we figured that that is just the sign that they have for all of these individual restrooms. So unfortunately, UNT is kind of perpetuating the binary representation there, but yeah, we wanted to clarify in our presentation what we have seen be suggested, and it's really a signage that shows what actual facilities are in the restroom. So like the symbol of the urinal, symbol of a toilet, and a handicap accessible sign. Like that's typically like what they recommend. So yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
I
we
agree.
we found a sign we wanted to use, but we're unable to because of, you know, facilities. But I assume that the Pride Alliance will, because they're the ones who made that signage that we included in our presentation, that they're the ones who we talked about using all gender as the terminology. So I assume on the documentation that they create, they will be using the more inclusive terminology and symbols.
We did spend quite a bit of time to discussing the name and what the sign would look like, and we had kind of wished we would have asked campus facilities before we had spent all that time doing the research, although it's good to know, you know. So we recommend to anyone who may be starting a project like that to check with your facilities team before maybe doing all the analysis.
I'm taking down some notes as we are entering into that. So thanks.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, thanks for your question.
I'm pretty sure that we did confirm it matches the other all gender restrooms across campus, the sign that we received.
Since there's just a minute more, I would like to make a comment. It's basically a response to both Shanta Smith's comment endorsing Ying's reminder about the value of storytelling. I considered starting off with a story, but did not. And this ties in with Natasha Allen's comment about the nature of diversifying our workforces. I think we do sometimes overlook the fact that people with disabilities are heavily discriminated against in the job search process. And the stimulus for this little presentation and an article that's going to be published in an ACRL publication in a while is that my sister's daughter she's about 25 years old. She's on the autism spectrum, and she wrote an article for McSweeney's, which is a web publication, on exactly this topic. And for the first time, she's become a strong disability rights advocate. And for the first time, I saw the reality of how challenging the job search is challenging, I think, for most of us, but how but almost prohibitively challenging it can be for people with all types of disabilities, including neurodiversity. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul. Well, thank you all for your presentations today. It has been really great to see the chat kind of affirm what everybody's been talking about today. It seems like a lot of universities are moving to all gender restrooms. Paul, a lot of people were saying that they also send out interview questions ahead of time to candidates. So it looks like all of the work that you have touched on today, we are being in calm together and we are doing this work. And so hopefully we'll continue to see a lot more progress and support at our institutions. So thank you so much for everyone for being here today. Our next sessions will start at 4 o'clock. I believe we have a couple of discussion groups going, and then we will be back at it at some point tomorrow. And then once you close out, you will also get a link to the session evaluation. So we really appreciate you filling that out for us. So from Midge, a very sleepy Midge, and I thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and we'll see you all later.
Thank you to everyone. Bye.